Good Sunday morning. I'm News Center Maine's Don Carrigan, and this week, as you can tell by the lineup, we're doing something a little different for our end-of-the-year version of Political Brew. We have four of our analysts here: Republican Lisa Keim, Democrat Ken Altshuler, Republican Garrett Mason, Democrat Betsy Sweet. I remembered everybody's name. And we're going to talk, in our first segment, we're going to talk about the year that's just about done and the political year we've had. And the next segment, we'll talk about the political year coming up. So first of all, I'll start down at that end, Betsy and Garrett, and then work our way up. Do we agree that the dominant political story of the year was Donald Trump?
Yes, but I think saying that misses the point. The dominant political story is what's going on with American people that would cause them to vote for someone who I think most people would say as a human being, we don't respect this guy or his values, but they are so hurt and believing that the system does not serve them, does not care about their daily lives, does not care what's happening, that they would turn to a candidate like Trump, as the party would turn to a candidate like Trump, because it's so broken. And that's the real story.
Garrett, what do you think about that?
I think the same thing, but the exact opposite, as usual, right, Betsy? I think, yeah, absolutely. Donald Trump is the man of the year. I mean, Time said that, but I mean, I think this is a guy. If you just look basically on the news stories, you look at you start the year off that Donald Trump's in court under false pretenses. He gets assassination attempt 1, assassination attempt 2, completely derails the Biden campaign in one debate. You go through the end of the year and he ends up not only winning the Electoral College but the popular vote. I mean,
well, yeah, but sorry.
Yes, he did.
Under 50%, though.
But there is nobody else that has served non-consecutive terms in our country other than Grover Cleveland. Yep. Donald Trump has now joined a club of 2. So, I mean, to say that anybody else is the story of the year, I just don't think it's realistic. But I think Lisa and I are happy about that.
Ken, would you say, did Donald Trump, we'll build on what they just said, did Donald Trump win primarily because Joe Biden hung around too long?
I'll tell you the three reasons I think that Donald Trump won. Number one, I do think it was a sexist election. The only difference between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden in 2020, very unpopular candidate, he got more percentage of votes than Kamala Harris did. There's only one difference between the two of them, and that is she's a female. I honestly believe that sexism had a huge role in this. Number two, exactly what Garrett said, assassination attempt. I think people saw now, God wants them to be alive and win. I think that had a huge impact on middle America. And number three, over 7 million Democrats did not turn out to vote. And that margin of victory was so slim. Had they shown up to vote, Kamala Harris would have won.
Interesting. Lisa, what do you think of that?
I think the American people are the story here, and we can't discount how important it was to have a free speech platform again, to have X, and have the free exchange of ideas. People lost trust in government. Biden was mentally incompetent. They were being lied to by the Democrats, and they didn't trust the Democrat Party for all of their policy reasons, but also that. And I also think the influential Democrats that came along beside Trump really solidified that for people, because there was Musk and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK. I think they also had a
Really? You think those Tulsi Gabbard and RFK really brought voters in?
I believe they did, yeah. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard was the rising star of the Democrat Party. I mean, she had influence before they decided she wasn't one of them. But I think the American people see her as someone that has integrity, and that meant a lot.
So you think that pulled in. So could the Democrats have won the presidency if Joe Biden had said back in January that I think I won't run for re-election?
Look, I think that both parties could have done better had they allowed democracy to work. We have got to look at how broken our little democratic system is. There was no primary in the Democratic Party, and the primary in the Republican Party started out with billionaires saying, if you vote against Trump, you were never going to have a political life. That is not democracy. Had we had an open primary, had we said, look, Joe Biden isn't going to do this, let's have an open primary and see who rises to the top. If people had said, we're not going to buy this, if Republicans had said, we're not going to buy this election, we're going to see who rises to the top, I think we would have seen very different things. But we have a system that is now controlled by moneyed corporate interests and elite at the top on both parties who are telling people underneath what is going to happen.
And let me add on this. The last 3 Democratic nominees were anointed. Okay, 2016, Obama said it's going to be Hillary. In 2020, they didn't want Bernie as a candidate. Joe Biden got in, and in 2024, Kamala was anointed. No primary for the Democrats really in 3 elections. That's why nobody rallied. There was no base for Kamala Harris because nobody elected her, nominated her as presidential candidate.
Well, and I guess the only thing I'd push back at, I do agree with Betsy on the influence of huge money in politics. I don't have the answer to how to fix that, but I can say this. That sounds like a Democrat problem. The Republicans had a primary, and people like Elon Musk and other people didn't come out to endorse Trump until
Even though Trump didn't participate in it.
He didn't participate in it, but he still won the votes, and we still went through the primary process. Nikki Haley stayed on essentially through the end. Ron DeSantis, an amazingly powerful figure in Republican politics, just did not live up.
And you
People
don't think
wanted
that
Trump.
the threats from Trump and the money from Trump and all of that and the violent threats
I
from
think he
MAGA
was
and stuff had an influence on that
violent
primary?
threat.
I don't see violent threats.
I don't see violent threats at all. I think
Absolutely not.
what we're talking about here is you had a former president of the United States who, believe it or not, 76 million people thought was vilified by the current administration. So I mean,
thought he won the election in 2020.
and thought that, and that's fine. But I mean, there's 76 million Americans that believe that, and
That's
so
a problem.
Maybe it's a problem. Maybe it's not. Maybe they're seeing something that we don't. I believe in the wisdom of the American people, and they reflected that in the election.
And there's money obviously influencing, but they saw the impact of the policies of Democrats, and it was hurting them. It was hurting their pocketbooks. The immigration problem, rising crime, those are real to them. It doesn't matter what talking head says; they're living it out. And
Or data.
And they voted accordingly.
Yeah.
Let's talk briefly about Maine in the time we have for this segment. What was the big story for Maine this year? The big dominant factor for politics in Maine? Lisa, we'll start with you because you were in government, state government, as a senator up until a month or so ago.
Well, the Lewiston shooting and then the subsequent investigation really dominated a lot of conversation around politics. And the fact that the yellow flag law that we have in Maine, which is such a robust process, would have stopped that shooting. And I have to remind people that that was the reason the law was put in. It was in reaction to shootings that were happening nationwide. And there was so much pushback from Republicans and Democrats who did not want that law. And it was crafted, and it was a bipartisan effort, and it was good. And that's what the investigation found. And I think not only is that
among other things,
a top story of 24, but I think that will carry into 25 as we continue to talk about gun control measures and really looking at that.
Okay. Ken, your thoughts?
I agree with her. I think one of the stories will be what was our reaction to that, because I don't think we've done enough to respond to gun violence in the state of Maine, because we're very gun happy in the state of Maine. I'll leave the Second Amendment alone. I think climate change, the storms of last year, I think are showing what the impact it's having on Maine. I think that's a huge story.
So I guess as part of that, and we'll toss down to Garrett and Betsy here, do we think state government responded reasonably well to these issues? Lewiston shooting, the big storms, climate change related. What do we think?
I think there was some appropriate response. I mean, having the commission go in and look into what happened in Lewiston and kind of glean things. I think the results of like how things should be handled, obviously those fall along partisan lines. But I think that brings me to one of the things that I think is also a story of this year, but also is going to be a story of next year, and that's mental health services in the state of Maine. And we were talking off camera about some things that I wish we had another show to talk about, quite frankly. But I think that is something that's going to be very important for the legislature to address. You have the end of the consent decree, and what does that mean? I learned some other interesting things from Betsy off camera about that. But I think children, people who need the services of the state, need to be prioritized. And I think that's something that Republicans and Democrats can come together on.
Yeah, and Betsy, you said that you thought that mental health was maybe quietly a major story that government had to deal with, but needs to do more.
Yeah, and I think about all three of these things: gun violence, climate change, and mental health for kids and adults. The problem that's missing is urgency. We talk about these things, and then these crises happen, and we're like, okay, let's have a commission. Oh, let's study. Oh, let's do this. The circle of time is really getting so narrow, and we just sort of do business as usual. And I think we have got to get some urgency. The other big story of 2024 is that Maine stayed blue. Despite all the predictions, we voted for Kamala Harris. We kept our Maine Senate blue. We kept our Maine House blue. And there are very few states in the country that have a Democratic trifecta. That says something about the people of Maine as well.
All right, and that sets us up for the second segment where we'll be talking about the year that's coming up. Political Brew will be back after this. Welcome back to this week's Political Brew. I'm News Center Maine's Don Carrigan. As we said an hour or so ago, we're doing something a little different. We have four of our analysts here to talk about the year that's passed and the year that's about to begin in politics. Let's start with the year that's about to begin. Ken, I'll start with you. What do we expect from President, currently elect, soon to be President Trump? What do we think is his administration is going to look like?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how much he defers to everyone else. Donald Trump has a very short attention span. I do too, so I don't fault him for that. But he has people like Elon Musk who he has delegated authority to. And until that becomes a threat to him, Elon Musk will continue to do it. I think he's going to delegate, but I think he's going to go after immigration. I think there's going to be mass deportations. I think he's going to do tariffs. I think that's going to hurt the economy. And I think Donald Trump's going to overreach. And I think the American people does not like overreaching. And I think it's going to come back to bite him because I think that he's going to do things because he thinks he has a mandate. The mandate was not necessarily about him. It was about change and the perception that there was an unpopular administration that had to get out of there.
Okay. Lisa, what do you think? Will he act as Ken suggests, or do you think he's going to go after reach even further?
I think we're going to see a return to business. He's mentioned that he's going to be very aggressive about returning business back to America. The goal here is to become more self-sufficient, so we're America strong. And tariffs, I think that's a bargaining chip. He is there playing chess while other people are talking about like he's playing checkers. And tariffs are a bargaining chip to get what he needs to do to make America strong. That is his goal. That's what he said. Absolutely, he's going to go after immigration. He needs to. We've had, Vance suggested 20 million come in during the Biden presidency. Other estimates are more like 11, but still just an enormous crushing to the social fabric.
Donald Trump does like to lob hand grenades out there and see what the response is after the explosion, correct? Garrett and Betsy, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think we're going to see what happens. But I think if he does what he says on day one, some of the things that Ken mentioned, I think people are going to be kind of surprised at what the impact is. We're already seeing that. The steelworker union who endorsed him in Pittsburgh, watching their factory go away, watching a mother I was sitting with who has a special needs student, hearing that the Department of Education, which funds 80% of special needs services in Maine, going away. She had no idea that was going to happen. Farmers in the Midwest who are dependent on immigrants to do the farm work and do the crops. When those things start to happen, if they do, and when they do, I think what we're going to be looking for is and then let me say the most important thing, which is undermining the checks and balances in democracy. That is something that Trump tried to do in his last term. He's going to do it again. And I think the question is going to be, are there enough people, Democratic and Republican, in the legislature, in the Senate, in the U.S. House, that are going to say, whoa, wait a minute. We didn't know you meant that, and stop it. I don't know that there's the Margaret Chase Smiths and the Olympia Snows who are going to stand up and say, you are undermining democracy, we're going to stop now. But that's a thing we need to be watching for.
And Garrett?
Yes, I think speed. I think that's what we're going to see out of the Trump administration. And like the non-consecutive terms is very, very important. You know, he had 4 years as president, and then he had 4 years out of office, and now he's been elected again. Nobody's ever had that type of, I guess you want to call it experience or focused learning on how the presidency and Congress work and the bureaucracy. So I think there's going to be a lot of speed right off and all of the things that Trump promised. Deportations, a return to lethality at the Department of Defense, the elimination of some of the things that make business hard. And quite frankly, I think Lisa's right. I think tariffs are a negotiation point. You see the government of Canada after 9 years is falling apart after one tweet of Donald Trump, and they're going to come, and that trade deficit is going to be eliminated, and I think that tariff threat is going to go away.
So you think a lot of the Donald Trump is known for bombastic comments of various kinds, right? You think a lot of that is just to get somebody's attention?
Absolutely.
Oh, I think he absolutely intends to do those things. I think that what he runs into is people in his own administration who are saying, not really. We can't really do that. We can't really deport. We can't really spend $30 billion deporting people.
So some of this then leads into now the Republican-controlled Congress, both House and Senate. and we're going to have to wait and see. Garrett, I'll have you start on this. We'll have to kind of wait and see how they respond, if they're a rubber stamp or if there's some, wait a minute.
Listen,
people.
there is a slim majority in the House. And, you know, Lisa and I have both served in elected office. Ken and Betsy have been around elected office a lot. When you have a slim majority like there are in the House and even the Senate, it's a 4-seat majority, that is nothing. I think, you talk about checks and balances, there it is. Every member of Congress is going to consider themselves a kingmaker, and the administration is going to have to deal with that. When I was majority leader in the Senate, Lisa was there as well. We had an 18-17 Senate, and every single day I had to deal with who was the kingmaker du jour. And so that's going to happen in Congress as well.
Well, and I think we're going to see, we just saw it in the continuing budget resolution, they wanted some certain things. Talk about chess playing. There's a lot of people who say that what Elon Musk wanted was that the thing that said you couldn't export technology to China is what he wanted out, and that's what got out. So maybe that was his chess play. But anyway, I think we're going to see, again, and as I said, as states and people who represent their states see what the impact is, the question is going to be, are they going to listen to their constituents and what's good for the constituents, or are they going to listen to the political rhetoric of Donald Trump and the threats from some of his supporters?
Yeah.
Well, how much are we going to see executive orders come out because Congress is not going to do anything? And Donald Trump will use his pen and try and do executive orders like Barack Obama did and tried to do more of. And I think he's going to go his own way. And I think that, and he's also going to go after a lot of his enemies, which is pretty much half of America.
Right.
Just like Biden did.
In light of what Betsy said here, what do we see, and Lisa, we'll start with you, what do we see Susan Collins doing, Senator Collins, who's going to be chair of the Appropriations Committee, a position she's worked to get for years, a very big and influential position. Will she be in a key spot to either help or oppose some of what President Trump wants to do with budgets?
Well, it's a very key position, absolutely. And my hope is that she really looks at our deficit and says, okay, we have to get serious about that. And she's in a key position to, take that on and make that a point that we look at. It's going to mean, to roll back some spending and roll back programs, and that's essential.
But will she be an ally of President Trump, or will she be skeptical?
Yes, she will be both.
Whatever gets her elected is what she'll be.
I think that Susan Collins is circumspect. I think that she is a person who thinks for herself. And she will ally herself with Trump when it's good, especially for Maine, and when she believes it's right. And then when she believes it's wrong, she won't. She will stand up to him.
I think she's going to be a little bit like the dog that caught the car, because she has wanted this position for a long time. She's got it. Good for her to get there, and she has been a woman of integrity, and she has served the people of Maine well. She is going to be in a very tough spot.
It's a hard spot.
Because those cuts are going to really matter. For example, in this last budget, Lisa, Trump asked them to increase the debt ceiling. He wasn't interested in the deficit. He wants to remove it. He wants to be able to give tax cuts that increase the deficit. So she is going to be in a position as a responsible legislator to have to say no. So I think she is going to be in a very tough spot, especially as someone who is running for re-election in 2026 in Maine.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to Maine, and let's talk about one of the things that's going to unfold over 2026, which is who is going to be running in 2025, who will be running in 2026 for U.S. Senate and for governor. So,
Are you starting
was
with
that an
Garrett?
endorsement we just had?
Yeah. Garrett and I are going to run for the hills.
All right.
Listen, I like my job. I like my life. Okay. All right.
So, and I think you could interchange both the Senate and governor, because I think that the pool of people, it's not clear who's going to be what.
Yeah.
On the Democratic side, I think we see Shanna Bellows, we see Troy Jackson, we see Hannah Pingree. I think those are the top contenders for those positions. On the Republican side, I think we see Peter Chinquette. I think
Peter Bennett.
Peter Bennett.
Rick
Bennett, who may run as an independent. I think we see Rick out there as a strong contender, and I'll leave it to you to say the others Republicans. But I think we see this pool of people with two really important seats, one a U.S. Senate seat and one, the governor's seat. And so I think that pool. I think what I'm hoping. Janet Mills has been mentioned for the Senate seat. Yeah. I'm hoping that we look to a new generation of leaders. I just think and it is not ageism, but we cannot keep having octogenarians run this country.
Amen.
As an octogenarian, I agree.
Me too.
You're forgetting a key
So I'm not
name.
running.
You are not an octogenarian.
I'm getting
okay?
close.
You're missing a key name, Jared Golden.
Oh, Jared, right.
And Jared, is he going to run as an independent? Is he going to run as a Democrat? I think he's going to run. I do.
He's going to run for something. I think Jared Golden is the
Yeah.
wild card. I mean, he is set up to run for basically any of those offices. There was an article in the Bangor Daily this past week about him calling out people for having Trump derangement syndrome. So Jared Golden has positioned himself in a very unique way to run for anything.
Does he have trouble in the primary if he runs
I think
as a
so.
Democrat?
I think so, and I think ranked choice voting plays into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think with Jared, he's everybody's second choice. So does that get him through a primary?
So, Garrett, I have to ask you, are you thinking about it?
Oh, I think in politics you never close any doors.
That sounds like a good
but
If you do it, I have to do it too, buddy.
okay, all right. Maybe it's me
else?
and you in the general, right? Yeah.
Who else do you see as potential Republican candidates?
Listen, I think there's a lot of people out there on the Republican side that are lined up really well for any of these races. I mean, you obviously top on that list has to be Austin Terrio. Yeah. He just completed a race, came very close to winning that race, and I think it would be a shame if he didn't run again.
And I'll let Lisa chime in because you've only got a few seconds left to get you to share your thoughts on
So
this.
a couple other names, Laurel Libby and Jonathan Bush, they're definitely throwing their hat in the ring, and we've got a lot of good people. So I think it'll just come down to primaries and ranked choice voting.
And all of that will be shaping up during the course of 2025 to be ready for 2026, right? Thank you all. It's going to be a turbulent year, because it's always a turbulent year, right? Thank you all for being with us. I hope you've had a terrific holiday season, and New Year's coming up. We'll make it a good one. Thanks for joining us. News Center Maine continues after this.